Welcome to ILTV's Weekly Insider. I'm Emily Schrader, coming to you from Israel. Today we'll be discussing the alarming spike in anti-Semitism that's manifested in recent weeks, coinciding with the Israel-Hamas war, in particular on campus. Since the October 7th attacks on Israel by terror group Hamas, the world has seen a rapid increase in anti-Semitic attacks and demonstrations. Even prior to the launch of Israel's ground operation in Gaza, Palestinian activists and the Free Palestine movement were holding rallies of support for Palestinians. Some of the scenes from campuses showed activists protesting memorial services of Jewish students, chanting that the acts of Hamas were justified, and other concerning calls to violence. Campuses have also seen administrations and faculty issuing statements of support for Hamas terrorists. Now, I myself experienced campus anti-Semitism in California nearly a decade ago, but the scenes we're witnessing today are significantly more severe than what I witnessed. Campus hate groups like the Students for Justice in Palestine have been harassing Jewish students, and there has been a trend in campuses and communities globally of self-declared pro-Palestinian activists ripping down flyers of kidnapped Israelis. In one case, they even replaced the word kidnapped with the word occupier. Now, keep in mind that these hostages are civilians, in many cases children, who live in southern Israel, not a disputed territory. So the defacement of such a flyer is really egregious and heartless. Today we have two guests joining us who are both experts on the battle against anti-Semitism on campus. Adela Kohab is a Jewish activist and law student joining us via Zoom from New York, and Ilan Sinelnikov, the president of Students Supporting Israel, also joining us via Zoom from Florida. Adela, let's start with you. You have experience dealing with school administrations yourself that have enabled anti-Semitism to thrive on campus. What do you make of the current campus climate? Is it about Israel or purely anti-Semitism? And are these administrations doing enough to protect Jewish students?
Look, Emily, I'll be honest, I am not surprised to see what's going on campus. When I was an undergraduate about 4 years ago, this was, maybe not at the level that we're seeing today with mass protests, but there was a very strong minority of students that have always held that Israel is an occupying force that should cease to exist. And now these voices have gotten louder, and they've gotten support from a lot of people who are just thinking that they're doing the right thing. I think most of the students on the protests are uninformed, and their misinformation has become anti-Semitism. In the case of administrations, I don't think that they're doing even close to enough. When I was an undergraduate, I sued NYU for failing to protect the Jewish community because the administration didn't care about Jewish student concerns. A Jewish student was assaulted at NYU, and the administration still did nothing. And now we see administrations taking middle-of-the-road statements instead of treating this as it truly is, a discriminatory, harassing conduct issue that, had it been for any other group, they would have taken seriously, and they would take actions against individual students.
Now, Ilan, you're working with numerous campuses as a part of SSI. What are some of the trends that you're seeing on campuses, and what are Jewish students feeling?
Yeah, some of the trends that we see on college campuses all over the country, not just in one specific location. It's that the students openly support Hamas. They openly support a terror group. They are not shy in saying it. We hear some horrible calls from places like Binghamton, where a speaker at a Hamas rally said that Israel is worse than Nazi Germany. And this is not an outlier or fringe voices. On the college campuses, 50% of the Generation Z students, according to research that I've seen, think that the Palestinians are the right side in this equation. Now, what it makes the Jewish students feel when they see so many people in their classroom, or people that sit next to them in the lecture, openly going out there and cannot first condemn the murder of 1,400 Israelis, and second, even encourage it or call it even for further violence, like in their Intifada chants. What does it make the Jewish or the Zionist students feel? And for sure, it makes them feel like this university has neglected them. And this is what was going on at large for over 10 years, when universities were neglecting Jewish students, allowing groups like SJP that we always knew support and promote terrorism, continue grow their voices, continue getting together and assemble without sanctioning those clubs. And this has all led to where we are today. The Jewish students might feel scared, but at the same time, the Jewish students are fighting back on every campus. They're proud. At Tulane University, there was an attempt to burn an Israeli flag, and we have seen a Jewish student charging at the pickup truck and grabbing the flag. A fight has started, but their flag was still kept safe, and the students overcame that problem as well. So the situation is not easy. It's very hard, but at the same time, in moments of crisis, that's when leadership is being tested the most.
Indeed. Now, Adela, what are your thoughts on the motives, if we can speculate, and the true intent of these so-called pro-Palestinian protests? Can we even call them pro-Palestinian? Are they actually supporting terrorist groups on campus, or are they supporting Palestinians?
I think they've made it very clear what they support. When they chant things like, we don't want 48, we want all of it. We don't want no two states, we want all of it. This is not about coexistence. This is not about a two-state solution. This is not about safety of Palestinians. This is about squarely the destruction of Israel. They do not want any two-state solution, which means a single-state solution where Israel ceases to exist. And like I said, I think that the people leading this protest, we know exactly what they believe. We've seen handbooks from Students for Justice in Palestine. We've seen their ideologies manifest on campuses for, yes, 15 years. And they do not believe Israel should exist at all. And unfortunately, like I said, I think a lot of people who are very well-meaning got roped into this. They don't even know what it is that they're chanting. They don't know the meaning of intifada when they chant intifada, intifada. They don't know the meaning of to the river, to the sea. But end of the day, these rallies, protests, I call them mobs, are chanting to the river, to the sea. They are chanting intifada, intifada. They want revolution. They want violent uprising, and they do not want the existence of Israel. So it doesn't matter what the intentions are of the individual students, whether or not they know it, they're supporting a genocide.
Ilan, your thoughts? Are these demonstrations pro-Palestinian as they claim?
It's not pro-Palestinian, it's pro-Hamas demonstrations. This is what it's all about. If there would be pro-Palestinians, so they would at least be able to condemn the murder of Israelis. What we see today on the college campuses, we see people waving Hamas flags, for God's sake. You see people that are actually calling for more violence. This has nothing to do with the pro-Palestinian demonstrations. It has everything to do with anti-Semitism. It has everything to do with hatred towards the Jewish collective and the Jewish state. And it has everything to do with supporting recognized terror groups. And what's ironic is that the U.S. government is firmly speaking out against Hamas and its terrorist actions, but at the same time, college students can't. And this is the gap between the generations.
That's a very good point. Adela, I'd like to discuss a little bit more about the options. What, if anything, can be done at a legal or administrative level to curb this anti-Semitism, and why isn't it being done already?
So I'll begin with the administrative level. Every academic institution has the obligation to prevent discrimination, right? And we've seen what they've done during, for example, BLM protests. We see the way that they support LGBTQ students when one of them is harassed. The issue is that when a Jewish flag is burned on a campus, nothing is done about it. Take what happened at NYU. An Israeli flag was burned. The Jewish community brought it to the administration. And instead of doing something about it, the administration gave an award to the group that burned it. And that wouldn't be true for any other community. I'm a Mexican citizen. I'm not a U.S. citizen. Had they burned a Mexican flag at NYU, I know for a fact the community would have supported me, the administration would have supported me as a Mexican student, and the group that burned it would be given sanctions. Now, what should the administrations be doing? 100%, every single Students for Justice in Palestine chapter should be losing their charter, the same way any other organization that promotes violence or any organization that seeks to make other students feel unsafe. Number one. Number two, individual students who have been taking things out of hand, who are making threats against their fellow students, those students should be at the very least suspended, if not expelled. Now, when it comes to what can be done on the legal level, I did sue NYU for anti-Semitism. Under Title VI of the Civil Rights Act, every academic institution must prevent discrimination and keep it from happening when it does happen, taking steps to remedy it. Now, under Title VI of the Civil Rights Act, that means that the school has a responsibility. It means that Jewish student voices matter, and they can sue this on a national level. They can sue on a federal court. They can bring a complaint against the academic institution in the Office of Civil Rights and the Department of Education. And the school, if they don't take steps to remedy it, will lose their federal funding. And if it's a private institution, they lose their tax breaks. So Jewish students do have a remedy. Now, that doesn't mean that every single Jewish student has a case, but that does mean that if you're experiencing the things that we've been seeing on these videos, which a lot of them are much worse than what I experienced at NYU, you likely do have a case. And for that, I recommend you get in touch with a legal professional, and you can get in touch with me directly if you follow me on Instagram.
Well, it sounds like we may need to take more action. The students may need to take legal action in order to remedy this problem, as it's been going on since I was in university in California. Ilan, I'm curious your thoughts. What could turn the tables in your mind on this surge in Jew hatred, essentially, on campus?
You know, to turn the table, it's going to be a very hard thing to do, because this problem was going on for more than 10 years. For 10 years, even for over a decade, pro-Israel Zionist students, Jewish students were saying that there is a problem on campus. But their concerns and their actual claims to events that took place, not to something imaginary, were never taken seriously. The universities always liked to clean things under the rug and to say that they might open some independent investigation, even when sometimes Title VI cases were brought up. And once again, they always ended up doing one big nothing. I'll tell you an example from the University of Ottawa in Canada. Our student there got a message from another fellow student that suggests her to go undercover when she gets to campus. And this other student is, of course, a Hamas supporter, and he actually sends a threat to our president saying, go undercover, do not show up your face on campus. Of course, that message was brought up right away to the police and to the administration. And the response is that we'll investigate, we'll take a look into it. But what happens is, by the time they finish investigating, violence already takes place and our student might be already hurt. Would the university do something when it's already too late? And the fact is that what's happening nowadays is that the universities are not even willing to do something after it's too late. We see what happened at Harvard University when a group of 30 student leaders and groups openly supported Hamas, and then there were trucks outside of Harvard calling them out. And what they did is supporting a terror group, things the way it is. No one lied about anything. Everything was what actually happened. And what Harvard said, that they're going to open investigation to look into doxing of their possible Harvard students. You know, so the administration has allowed this problem to happen for over a decade. No one was taking things seriously. And in order to overturn the table, I believe that the number one thing that needs to be done, aside from students marching and protesting, Jewish students marching and protesting, is that university donors, Jewish donors, Zionist donors, not just Jewish, need to start pulling money out of the universities. This is one of the only ways that the universities starts to understand. The universities are afraid of bad publicity and they're afraid of losing funds. And both of those things need to happen. We need to shame those universities, we need to pull out the money, and we need to show that the days in which the Jewish people or the Jewish students were kind of taken lightly are over.
Adela, now one of the challenges that we have heard about in recent weeks especially is Jewish groups, fringe Jewish groups such as some of those currently calling for a ceasefire. Now, in some cases, these groups have even made excuses for the massacre which took place on October 7th. How much of an impact do these anti-Israel groups have on the anti-Semitism trend that we're seeing?
They're having the largest impact. The worst thing for a Jewish person is a Jewish person who's against the Jewish people. What's happening right now is that these voices are being tokenized and they've become the Jewish friend that everyone has, because they take it away from the understanding that 94% of Jews support the state of Israel, 94% of Jews stand with the state of Israel, and that other 6% is speaking for the majority of us. They're separating this issue of anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism. When we as a united community come together and agree that anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism, it's an attack on our peoplehood, and it's making us unsafe, these Jewish people are coming out and they're separating the issue. They're confusing the issue for people around them. And I think what's most dangerous about it is that they don't understand that for most of these people, a good Jew doesn't exactly exist, because if they're walking the streets and they're visibly Jewish, they're at the same risk of anti-Semitism of being attacked that they're promoting without even noticing it. In a way, it's kind of like a snake eating its own tail. And I wish I could speak to each one of them individually to explain to them that you can advocate for Palestinian life, you can advocate for Palestinian statehood even, without having to advocate for Hamas, without condoning the murder of Israelis, and without demonizing your entire nation.
Right. Ilan, your thoughts on this? What about these fringe Jewish groups who are calling for ceasefire, for example?
You know, the University of Michigan, first of all, calling for a ceasefire, it's losing to Hamas. You know, calling for a ceasefire, everyone needs to understand that calling for a ceasefire at the moment is basically letting 1,400 Israelis to die and it's saying, Hamas, here we go, take a break, we're not going to go after you. And this cannot happen. But I'll give you an example from the University of Michigan. At 1,000 people protested against Israel, and we brought our group of SSI members to counter-protest as well. But most of the speakers at that protest against Israel were Jewish people. Most of the crowd was not, but most of the speakers at the protest were Jewish, because SJP, those terror supporting groups like Students for Justice in Palestine, and their kind of branches all over the country, what they love to do the most is to put a Jewish face that is anti-Zionist to speak against Israel in their rally. They're tokenizing those voices, and they uplift those voices to make them sound like they're way bigger than what they actually are. And they try to use it in order to justify their actions. And those Jewish students don't understand that, if Hamas would be done with Israel, they would take care of them just as much. Now, I'll tell you something. At the end of the day, the numbers don't lie. And in a student supporting Israel, at least, we brought over 25,000 students to march on the streets. And I don't think there's 25,000 anti-Israel Jewish students on those college campuses. So at the end of the day, no matter how you look at it, and just like Adel mentioned, the majority of the Jewish community, including the Jewish community on the campuses, is Zionist, is pro-Israel, and the numbers don't lie. And we're not going to let SJP to tokenize some fringe minor voices.
Now, Ilan, just to follow up on that, I mean, we've discussed, the three of us already have discussed how grave the situation is with anti-Semitism on campuses. I want to hear from you guys. We'll start with you, Ilan. How risky is this in terms of physical safety? I mean, we have seen a lot of harassment increasing in the past few weeks. We've seen vandalism. We've even seen support for violence and calls to violence. And just a couple of days ago, we basically saw a lynch mob in Russia searching for Jews or Israelis as a plane landed. It seems that the violence against Jews is more tolerated, more accepted than ever. So are we going to see this on campus as well? Is there a physical safety risk? Ilan?
Yes, there is. And yesterday we sent out a message to all of our students across the country, and we told them that the last 3 weeks were hard, but the next 3 weeks won't be easier. And vice versa, we anticipate even more problems and anticipate even more violence. And we don't need to go far. Last week at Tulane University, and there was a broken nose. There was a fight that started, and a Jewish student was punched in the face, again, after they charged to try to save the Israeli flag from being burned. And a Jewish student ended up with a broken nose at the university campus. Of course, the university mentioned in their, to give them a good word, it was off campus and the anti-Israel protest was not allowed. But at the same time, it happened, and it would not just stop at Tulane. I believe it will continue to other locations as well. And what we tell our students, because what they try to do is not just to terrorize us in Israel, they also try to terrorize us on campuses. They try to scare the students from showing up, because if they're going to be violent, maybe Jewish students or pro-Israel students will say, it's better for me not to show up outside on the campus grounds. It's better for me to stay home. And if that's going to be the case, they're going to win this fight. So we cannot let that happen. And we told all of our students that no matter what, we must continue showing up on the streets. We must continue taking the campus grounds, maybe create bigger separation distances between the crowds, but we cannot leave the university exposed just to one side of the story. We need to make sure that there will be security as well between the sides. We need to make sure that we sometimes do our own stuff, not being dependent on what the opposition does. We don't need to show up only when there is an anti-Israel protest. We vice versa, we need to double up our efforts when there's nothing going on to show that there is a strong pro-Israel voice that supports Israel on college campuses. But the situation will get worse before it gets better. And for our students, we of course encourage them and always tell them that safety always comes first. But at the same time, we cannot let groups like SJP terrorize us into fear and make sure that we stay at home. The Israeli flag will be waved on every college campus across this country.
Adela, your thoughts. Do you think we're going to see actual violence against Jews on campuses?
Yes, unfortunately I do. And I want to point to two things that happened in the past week. In the past week, students at Cooper Union, which is here in New York, were inside of the library when a mob stormed and surrounded the library. They started banging physically on the doors, yelling, "Free, free Palestine, to the river, to the sea." The librarians locked the doors and told the Jewish students to remain inside for their safety. When the mob died down a little bit, they were able to be securely escorted by security out of the library while the mob followed behind them. That happened last Wednesday. And then on Friday, this past Shabbat, students at Columbia University were inside their Jewish Student Center when there was a mob outside too that was marching through the campus. And again, they had to remain inside for their own security. Luckily, the administrators, the professionals who were in the room in both of these two instances made sure to protect Jewish students. But having Jewish students cower inside of a building while the doors are locked and there's a mob outside is something that should be very alarming to everyone, especially because there won't always be professionals that can lock the doors, and locks don't always work. And I hate to think what would happen if those mobs would have made it into Cooper Union. I know two students personally who were inside of the Cooper Union library, and they're telling me how afraid they were in that moment. And now, when I was at NYU, again, a Jewish girl was assaulted. And when I went to the administration, I thought definitely a line has been crossed. Okay, the school didn't do nothing when we had BDS. The school didn't do anything when they were posting pictures of Jewish students, when they were burning Israeli flags, when they were taking flags and hanging them from trees and lampposts torn to shreds. The school did nothing. But when they assaulted a Jewish girl and NYPD stepped in, I said, surely the school will do something. And they didn't. And unfortunately, I don't think anything has changed. So for Jewish students, for your own safety, of course, remain safe. But like Elon said, don't back down. Because if we let other people decide where a Jew can and cannot feel comfortable, particularly on a college campus, we're letting anti-Semitism win.
Well, I don't think I could have put it anything better myself with the two of you. Let's hope that the Jewish students have the same courage when they're facing down this. I'd like to thank both of our guests for their insight. Let's hope that the governments and school administrations are taking this threat a little more seriously than they have in the past before someone gets hurt. Thank you for joining us, Adela and Elon.
Thank you. We'll win.
I'm Emily Schrader, and this was ILTV's Insider. For more of the latest updates from Israel, make sure to subscribe to our newsletter at iltv.tv. Thanks for watching, be safe, and shalom from Israel.